Ni hao.
Good morning.
Good day.
Welcome and thank you for joining the PwC webinar China Connection, How to Assess the Chinese Market. So without further ado, let me present you our presenter today. So my name is Darren Chong. I'm representing China Business Group, a team dedicated to support China inbound, outbound investment across 29 countries in PwC CEE network. And then with me today, we have Mihao and Agatha from International Tax Services to talk about legal form of doing business and taxation in China. And what's more, we have a special guest today to talk about a success case study on investing in China presented by Krzysztof Domareski, Chairman of Supervisory Board at Selena FMSA. So let's move on to the agenda today. And this is an overview of the agenda for today. So it's very interesting. It's divided into 5 different parts by different presenters. So I hope you will stay tuned for 60 minutes and until the end of the presentations. So part 1, overview of China market and why China. So basically, China has transformed from a sourcing destination or big factory to a market with 1.3 billion of populations and provides ample of domestic opportunity for the foreign investors. So the size of China and the regional diversity over 20 different provinces provided different possibility for the investor to invest or do business in China. So despite the slowdown in this Chinese GDP growth in the past few years, but you can see here, China is still one of the world's largest economy and still one of the highest GDP growth markets with annual growth rate of 6.5% annually. So, and when it comes to trading, import and export perspective, very unlikely the export of China will pick up in the coming years due to slow-moving demand and rising protectionism, basically from the America. However, the demand for import is expected to increase due to the domestic consumption. So China domestic consumption will remain very active and will be the major driving force for the Chinese economy growth. And it is expected to reach $6 trillion by 2030. So unsurprisingly, service sectors has become the leading industry for Chinese economy. So this is certainly a good news for our CEE companies to which would like to invest in China. So the services sectors players such as IT, consulting, high-tech services, hospitality, educations, and sport industry, so will benefit from these services sectors. So in summary, there are 5 important factors why China is a promising destination for you to invest. So first of all, is political and economic stability under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, and also the domestic Chinese market, as mentioned, 1.3 billion of population, diversity over 20 provinces with different characters, different market approach, and also different opportunity. Competitiveness. And China is no longer a country with a cheap labor cost productions. China is very competitive when it comes to infrastructure, resources, and talents. So, and also one thing is very important I would like to highlight here is the enforced regulatory business environment in China. For example, there's a stricter intellectual property right law and also commercial law in China right now. So, and finally, and this is very important as well, there are many new policy to attract the foreign investment to invest in China. For example, with the lower market entry restriction for certain industries such as banking, educations, and transport.
Darren, if I can ask you a question,
Yeah, sure.
I think the intellectual property, that is a big concern of foreign investors in China. I think in the past, this aspect of investment was not really the best one, and Chinese people or Chinese businesses were perceived as those who are not really, let's say, following the IP protections. So can you say that something has changed over the recent years with the introduction of the law? Would you say, can you say that the investors are let's say safe when introducing new goods or new services to China?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a very important concern for many investors going into China because they would like to be protected when it comes to legal aspect.
Yeah.
So many years, of course, intellectual property right is not a very key topic in here. But right now, it's because China going really global and internationalized. So and they learn a lot in the past as well. And then a lot of enforcement also from different countries, like from European Union and from America as well. So China is so much ready right now. So, and most importantly, we talk about the new leadership, new presidents right now. So, and we see a lot of changes when it comes to legal environments of doing business in China. So definitely right now it has improved a lot. So I think what our investors should bear in mind is to get a trusted advisor, to help them to map up the whole investment when it comes to their market entry strategy.
Okay.
All right. So Agatha, would you like to read out the question for our participants today?
Yes, with pleasure. We thought, as we have quite many participants on our webinar, we are definitely interested why you have decided to join the seminar, and what type of business activity are you currently actually performing in China. So there are a couple of questions or possibilities. Please kindly choose just one. So there is manufacturing, trading, services, consulting, financial investments. There is an option also to say, I would like to start my business activity in China and I have undertaken several actions towards this goal. The next one says that I would like to start, but I have not yet taken any actions. And the last one says, I'm not planning any activities in China.
So you have 30 seconds to answer, and then afterward you're going to share the result.
Yeah, which is quite interesting for us.
Yeah, in the past when we look at the CEE companies, and mainly it's and they are more into trading with China. And we see the slight changing right now. So we do see the CEE companies basically they come and invest in China, including building the factories and running the production as well.
So what is actually changing is that from, let's say, an offshore activity, they are becoming more onshore. Yeah?
That's a very good point here, because as I just presented, the domestic market is growing. So the export of China is decreasing, but you see the domestic consumption is increasing. So, and that's why it's for our CEE companies, so if they really want to go into China, they need to focus on the increasing growth market of domestic market in China.
And in your experience, how an investor from the CE region is perceived by Chinese by Chinese business? Yes.
Yeah, of course. And there is increased awareness about CE companies right now. So when you talk about the past, the bilateral relations and all that. So and it takes some time, but I think right now with the very, very good Sino and CE bilateral relations, and the awareness increase, and they do understand CE is a potential destination for different industry, for agriculture, for energy, and for infrastructure.
Okay. Can we have the results, please, once again? Thank you. Okay, so we do have the results.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are quite interesting. Michał, will you comment the results, please?
Yeah. So from the results, it seems that we have relatively equal results for the first three answers. So it seems like it seems like trading, manufacturing, and services. These are the types of activities that our participants are already performing in China, and also around 30% took response D and E. So it means that 30% of answers were saying that you want to start a business in China, however, and you have taken certain actions towards this goal. And the same amount of responders said, around 13% said that you would like to start a business in China, but yet you have not taken any action towards this. And around 25% of you actually said that at this stage you are not planning of expanding your activities in China. So it's just interesting to see that quite a lot of participants are already in China with business presence. Either it's manufacturing, trading, or provision of services.
Yeah. Okay, right now let's move on to the part 2 of the presentation. So that will be presented by Michał. Michał, would you like to start right now?
Thank you, Darren. So now that you've seen that Chinese economy is growing and is actually offering a lot of opportunities, and domestic internal demand is also higher and higher, you're probably, those of you who have not yet started their adventure in China are thinking of how can I set up activities in China by going there, and what types of legal forms of what types of companies can I use to enter into this market. And probably before we will jump into deciding whether we will choose, for example, limited liability company or a partnership or a holding company, it's worth thinking and taking into account the foreign investment catalog that is issued by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, because it's a sort of a roadmap, a guideline through which the Chinese government is trying to direct investors towards certain industries. So to start with, before we say that, okay, we want to perform a business in publishing in China, we need to see whether or not this industry is actually allowed for foreign investors, because actually publishing is a prohibited industry for foreign investors. So basically from this catalog you could see 3 different groups of industries. One of them is encouraged, and this basically means it's a list of industries for which Chinese government is encouraging investors to come in. And it entails, for example, manufacture of infrastructure, automobile industry, industries related to environment. So within this group, actually foreign investors will have a bit easier because they can expect certain subsidies, certain tax incentives from the Chinese government. So it would be definitely easier to pick and encourage sectors from this catalog. There are also restricted industries. Those are the ones that are actually allowed for foreign companies. However, there are a bit stricter rules with respect to setting up a business. So, for example, if a foreign investor wants to go into mining or higher education, very often it will be required to set up a joint venture with the Chinese partner, and there are certain thresholds for the foreign investors with respect to the shareholding. So restricted businesses are permitted. However, there are additional barriers that we'll need to face. And for those that are prohibited, there are 36 of them. Actually, there is no option of going into those type of industries. And for example, publishing or gambling are the types of industries that are prohibited for foreign investors. And those seem to be obvious that the Chinese government want to protect these industries from foreign investors. However, there are some of them in this catalog among the prohibited ones would not be that obvious. So, for example, interesting thing is that building golf courses or villas are also prohibited for foreign companies. and it will be listed in this catalog, which is publicly available.
And Michał, within the business which is encouraged, can a foreign investor set up a subsidiary without any Chinese participant, I mean, or shareholder or any government?
Yes,
So
yes.
I think that may be important.
Definitely, definitely, and I'll talk about it a bit later. But for the encouraged industries, it's possible to set up a WOFI, which is a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, that is then can be 100% owned by the foreign shareholder.
Okay, so I think it also shows that China is not that exotic as one can think, because in many countries in Asia, this is quite common that to set up a company there must be some sort of let's say domestic local shareholding, which I understand is not the case.
Not the case, yeah.
here.
I think since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, these legal barriers have successfully been diminished and eliminated. So it's much easier for the investors from abroad to come in and invest.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the different legal forms that are available for investors in China. I listed 8 of them, and probably you could spend a lot of time talking about the details, but here I'll just give you a flavor of each different legal forms and what kind of advantages and disadvantages a foreign investor can expect from each of the legal form. So starting from the first one, which is most probably the most popular form of setting up a business in China, is this wholly foreign-owned enterprise called WOFI. And from 2009, around 80% of approvals from the Chinese government actually related to WOFIs. So it's basically a legal entity that can be set up in 100% by the foreign investor. So it gives a lot of control and flexibility to the foreign shareholder. So there is no need to have a Chinese counterpart within this legal form. And it's usually set up as a limited liability company that is governed by the board of directors. And this type of entity can hire directly local Chinese employees. And there is, of course, a requirement to have a registered share capital for WOFI, which is around 13,600 euro. So to sum up, this is the most popular and relatively straightforward entity that allows a foreign investor to have a total control over the entity in China. And there are also different types of WOFIs. So certain WOFIs are dedicated for manufacturing companies. There are WOFIs dedicated to trading companies, and those that deal with services provision and consulting. The other one is the foreign investment company limited by shares. It's relatively similar entity to WOFI. The difference is that here we are talking about the joint stock company, so about the company that is able to issue shares that are easily transferable and can be publicly traded. And the difference between WOFI and this entity is that within this entity, Chinese individuals can directly invest in it. So it can be owned by the Chinese individual investors. What's important to know is that for this entity, there are stricter legal regulations and much higher minimal capital requirement to invest in, which is 4 million euro. So probably this might not be the most suited legal form for investors who want to set up activities from like a greenfield business from the beginning. It could be more used as an investment vehicle for the existing company. Joint ventures. So there are 2 types of joint ventures in China. There is a cooperative joint venture and equity joint venture. And in the past, equity joint venture was less popular than the cooperative joint venture. It's important to know that, as I said, there is a list of restricted industries in which investors can come in and invest in China. And for those industries, joint venture would be a must to come in. So in both cooperative and equity joint ventures, we need to have a Chinese counterpart, and it's a legal form that is widely used when the foreign investor wants to use experience, connections, relationships that are the distribution network that has been developed by the Chinese partner. However, it also has its disadvantages. For example, here we need to always find a consensus with the foreign Chinese partner. Certain decisions need to be taken unanimously. So it can be a bit harder to control and to manage than WOFI, but sometimes just need obligation to enter into joint venture with a Chinese partner. And the difference between cooperative and equity joint venture is mostly about the division of profits coming out from this legal entity. So within the equity joint venture, the profits will be correlated with the shares equity put by investors, and with the cooperative joint venture, it's written in the agreement between both parties how the profits will be split. Okay, and partnerships. Foreign investment partnerships, this is actually a relatively new investment vehicle because regulations regarding the partnerships in China came into force as of around 2010. And we can have general partnerships and limited partnerships. So here, this type of legal form is actually attractive for investment companies, private equities, because partnerships would allow for easier distribution of funds and more flexible structure of investment into the partnership. And similar to other countries, it is managed by the partners. So for general partners basically manage the affairs of the partnerships. And here it's a tax transparent entity, so we don't have taxation at the level of the partnership, but at the level of the partners. So it can be interesting option for investors that do not require heavy, significant investments, and want to structure its business in a more flexible way. That partnership would be a good solution in these circumstances. Holding companies, they are also available for investors in China. They can be used for consolidation of management function, back office functions, R&D in China. However, they require relatively high minimum share capital, which is 28 million euro. And actually, this is the only type of legal form that can conduct holding activities. And it's important to know that holding companies cannot be engaged in manufacturing activities, but they can do trading, for example. So holding company would also be an option for companies that have investments that amount to they require significant amount of investments, and have investors that have, for example, multiple projects in China that can be structured under subsidiaries of such holding company in China. And the remaining two legal forms, which are representative office and the branch, these are the forms that would be used for investors that are just starting their adventure with the Chinese market. So rep office would be a vehicle for new market entrants to test the market, to do the marketing activities, to promote certain goods, to establish relations with the Chinese partners. However, within the representative office, we cannot conduct any commercial activities. So we cannot buy and sell products and do things related to distribution or manufacturing. So this is mostly to I would say the first legal form to enter the market, to test the market and conduct certain promotional and marketing activities. The advantage of this form would be that there is no minimal capital requirement, so the representative office can be relatively easy to set up and would not require heavy amounts of investments to start business. And the last legal form I'd like to talk about is the branch, and it's not that popular in China, and it's restricted just for, in practice, it's used mostly by the financial services sector, and oil and gas companies. So within the branch, we do not have a separate legal presence in China. It's just an extension of a foreign company in China, and this company does not have a separate management board. It's actually the management board of a mother company that is liable for any activities in China, and it's subject to taxation similarly to other subsidiaries. The income needs to be allocated to the branch in China and subject to taxation as the same way as, for example, WOFI. Branch also can hire employees directly to conduct its activities.
Michał, I think we have an interesting question. Let's see whether we can answer it. So there is a question, yes, whether are there any limitations in establishing WOFI headquarters? So I understand the idea is to set up a WOFI, but then this WOFI would have various subsidiaries all over China. So you have talked about the holding company. So in China, let's say if I want to have a structure whereby I have a holding company and various subsidiaries around China, so not branches, but let's say legally separated subsidiaries, can I have WOFI on the top, or do I need to have a holding company?
That's a good question. I would say that you would need to have a holding company, to have a structure where you have a holding company and several subsidiaries underneath to conduct operations.
Yeah, and let's say we will come up to tax later, but let's say the why having a Chinese holding company would be actually better than having a foreign company as the parent, because obviously we can have a structure whereby we have a foreign company owning several subsidiaries all over China, let's say, engaged in various businesses. But if we have such a structure, then upon distribution of each dividend up to the foreign company, there will be definitely withholding tax. We will speak about later. Whereas if we have a holding company, a Chinese one, then we can, under certain circumstances, but generally distribution of profits from one subsidiary through the holding company to the other, that's free of taxation. So this can be one of the elements why the holding company, the Chinese holding company, can be more attractive. And simply on the other hand, the Chinese government, yes, they have set up very high level of equity, but this is also, let's say, to enhance setting up the holding companies in like real businesses. So if the case is sufficiently strong, if the level of business has grown to a certain extent, then it makes sense to have a holding company and to have a reinvestment vehicle. So that's one of the, on one hand, it's a sort of a barrier that a holding company is not simply for every entrepreneur who wants to operate in China.
Okay, Agatha, to add on your question a while ago, I think our participant just asked, like, they would like to know the relation between the headquarters and subsidiaries when it comes to taxation and transfer and all that. But we know these are very important questions, and I think because we have time constraint for 60 minutes and we will actually attend to you personally after the webinar. So please feel free like to send us the email. We will display our contact detail later on, because like we really have to stick with the schedule, because and Michał, I think you want to go for your last summary of your presentation, right?
That's correct.
So I think this is very interesting, I think. Yeah,
that's correct, Darren. So to sum up, in China, here we just listed a couple of important points and matters from practical perspective about the setting up a business in China. So the first thing to remember and to note probably would be that although there is a lot of regulations on setting up a business and about, for example, minimal capital requirements. In practice, you can find different perception and different approach of Chinese authorities in different parts of the country. So the differences can be within the provinces, for example. Although there is a minimal capital requirement in the law, actually the real requirement from the local authorities can be much higher. Another point would be that for foreign investors, the company and the project that will be conducted always must be approved and authorized by the authorities. So each time the investor needs to be prepared to present a business plan, a feasibility study that needs to be approved. So it needs to be well thought out and it needs to be prepared in a way that the foreign investor could go through this, receive this agreement from the permission from the authorities. And most documents that will be submitted, all the documents that will be submitted to the Chinese authorities will need to be in Chinese. And it's good to have a local advisor that would help you to go through these requirements, because doing it on your own can be actually a difficult task to do. I can also add that, for example, a Chinese bank account, this should not be something that would be very complicated and troublesome and time-consuming. It should be rather straightforward process. Setting up a company can take in between 1 month to 4 months, more realistically to 4 months. And approximate costs of advisor or consul that could help you with setting up a business in China would be around €4,000. But here we are talking only about the support and setting up the business. Of course, there will be a lot of other costs relating to administrative costs and share capital that would need to be covered.
All right. So thank you, Michał, for your part. And right now, so we have another question for you, which is very interesting. So, and I know some of you have started to do business in China or have some concern as well. So what is your main concern relating to setting up a business in China? So A, cultural differences. So, and B, like regulatory issues, tax environments, cost of operation, and others. So you have basically like 30 seconds to answer. So like, and Michał, it sounds like setting out in a company in China, it doesn't sound like so complicated.
No.
So, but there's like the formalities, like the documents and all that, and the language barriers and all that. I think that is a bit hassle, like a Chinese investor from CE region actually should expect, like when they go into Chinese market and to set up the company.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Darren. So setting up the company from the formal perspective might not be that difficult. I think what's important are these business plans and feasibility studies.
Yeah.
Because this is a basis for the Chinese tax authorities to give you permission that you can run actually these activities. So you need to present it well to get the approval, and and prepare all the documents in Chinese. So from the very beginning to answer all their questions, what will be your product, what kind of services you want to render, on to what customers you direct your offer. So these are all the important matters that you need to think about before submitting your application. Yeah.
And waiting for the results, Darren, in China, like if I am a foreign investor and I want to communicate with authorities, I mean, do they speak English or do I need a Chinese translator if I don't know Chinese?
Yeah, and definitely I would say it's like it really depends. So it's like, and basically I would personally advise that to get a consultant or advisor who actually can help you to communicate with the Chinese authorities in Chinese language. Okay. They'll be much more efficient. So we have the result in here. So it's like the result is for cultural differences, like 20% of the participants actually mentioned that is your main concern. But most of them say it's regulatory issues, which is up to 65% of the participants, and 10% for tax environments, and nobody think cost of operation is a main concern. I'm so glad to hear that. So, and 5% is others. Okay, I think we need to move on to the next part. It's very interesting to supplement what Michał just mentioned a while ago about taxation in China. So Agatha, would you briefly describe about your part, like taxations?
Yes, yes, thank you. Okay, so I think I will be able to respond to some of the questions which were placed on the chat. So to give you an overview of the tax system in China, in fact, it's not that different from the European concepts which we know. So there is corporate income tax. In China, there is VAT, there is personal income tax. As for corporate income tax, the rate is 25%. So again, not that higher as we have it here in the CE. The VAT rate is 17%. For small businesses, it can be even 3%, and there are some goods which can be charged with a reduced rate of 13%. The VAT works more or less like in the EU, so it should be neutral when the goods are exported. There should be zero VAT on it. So I don't think VAT should be an issue when you plan your investment in China. When it comes to corporate income tax, what you need to know is that there is a need of paying monthly or quarterly payments. So that's a cash flow issue. For corporate income tax, also the major costs which are allowed, if you set up a Chinese subsidiary, yes, you can charge the Chinese subsidiary with management services. Generally, you can charge it with royalties. This is also an allowed cost. You can finance that that subsidiary with a loan. China has some thin capitalization rules. These rules are, let's say, the debt to equity ratio is 2:1. For finance industry, it is the gap is larger. I think it's around 5:1. Generally, the profits are recognized on accrual basis. There is a possibility of also utilizing tax losses, similarly as in the case of Poland. It is 5 years from the year when the loss was incurred. China also has withholding taxes, so payments like dividends, interest, and royalties are subject to 10% withholding tax in China. And actually, most of the treaties keep these rates at the same level, or they reduce them only to a smaller extent. I will show it on the chart. I mean, we have just presented here major countries from the CE region, as we have quite many CE participants on the call, and certain larger jurisdictions which we think may be interesting for you. But as you can see, most of the rates are 10%. Sometimes you can see 5%. I will go back with one slide. So, when you think about the business in China, I mean, yes, you need to take into account that anything you earn will be taxed with 25%. Plus, on the top of that, if you distribute money, China will want its 10% share in the profits that are distributed out of China. Yes, we have heard that there are certain exemptions or certain let's say boosters, yes, which should make the foreign investors to come to China. And I have grouped them into several categories, but there are special economic zones. However, there you can benefit from the tax exemption only for 2 years, and then in certain economic zones you can then benefit from a reduced rate to 15%. Generally, the businesses which can benefit from these reduced rates are high-tech businesses, so IT type of businesses. Sometimes certain part of productions can benefit from let's say reduced from reduced level of revenue to be recognized for tax purposes. So, for example, not 100%, but only 90% of profits are can be recognized or must be recognized as a taxable basis. There are incentives for venture capital, so 70% of the value of the investment can be recognized as a cost. For R&D booster, yes, there is one. There is an additional write-off of 50% of R&D costs to be included in the tax base. So as you can see, there are quite a number of instruments which may reduce the 25% rate. And now there was a question around how to, let's say, set up in China, whether to do it directly, say from Poland or from a CE country, or whether to do it through an intermediary company. And the practice is that quite a number of businesses are actually investing through Hong Kong. The major reason for that is dividend withholding tax. Hong Kong is a separate tax, let's say, location, yes, from China, so they are independent in terms of taxes. And China has a treaty with Hong Kong, and based on that treaty, any dividends which is distributed to Hong Kong is subject only to 5% withholding tax, and obviously exempt in Hong Kong from taxation, so which makes the cash flows and the overall profitability of the investments in China more attractive, and that is why Hong Kong is used very often. So yeah, that's I would say the question or the issue to consider. Yes, do we think the business will grow and will be enough profitable to start from with a holding structure, and that holding structure actually can be located in Hong Kong, but then again, distribution from Hong Kong to Poland or to any other CE country is again complicated. So we would have to have another European holding company on the top, which makes the structure quite complex. So yeah, I would encourage you to think it well over before you interpose any company between China and Poland. Okay, I think on taxes that's all. I will hand over to Darren, who will share with you, I think, the most important message, where the opportunities lie actually for the CE entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you, Agatha. So there are ample of business opportunity for the company in CEs in China. So these are the leads of the industry. So and we think that there's an opportunity for companies in CEE. So agriculture, modernizations, and high technology, high-tech machinery. So we talk even like environmental treatments industry, and it's getting more important right now in China. So health industry, transport constructions, and education modernization. So these are the key sectors will actually really like as a important opportunity for companies CE to invest in China. So, and right now we have something really interesting for you. So we have pre-recorded an interview between PwC and the chairman of Selena FM SA. So it is about a success story on investing in China. So it takes around 10 minutes, a lot of tips on doing business in China. So I hope you pay attention and enjoy the video. So let's watch it together right now.
We are hosting today Mr. Krzysztof Domarecki, Chairman of the Supervisory Board of Selena FM SA. Good morning.
Good morning, ni hao.
What is Selena's current business presence in China?
Currently, we operate in 2 locations. In Nantong, Jiangsu province, we have a PU foam plant that operates mostly on entire China, mainland China. And from this factory, we sell and distribute our PU foams through the country. In Foshan, is Guangdong province, we produce silicones and some sealants. And from that factory, we sell products mostly export and mostly over Pacific. It means to Americas, South and North.
How did it all start? What motivated you to expand into Chinese market And what were the key aspects that you took into consideration when deciding where to expand into China?
As you probably remember, in 90s and beginning of 2000, all over the world, it was a big rush to China. And many of West European companies, they start in even 80s, some of them, the biggest one, and many of them in 90s. So we start in China in between 2005 and 2008, and it was relatively late. And the first idea was the same rush like for many other European companies. In fact, Chinese market is so big, but it is also so difficult.
How long have Selena been preparing itself to start the business in China, and what were the biggest fears while planning the business expansion?
Preparations took 3 years. During that time, we visit about 11 China provinces. We met some potential partners. We analyzed the market, and we met over 20 local governments. First of all, it is not easy to understand so different culture. There is a language barrier, as you know, but there is also culture barrier, and there is a barrier of totally different mindset in almost every aspect of the life, and this influence into business. So if you ask about fear, it was can we communicate and can we work together with our Chinese partner properly, and can we understand each other without too many mistakes from both sides. In fact, it was not easy to manage, and it was a big challenge for the beginning. Now it's less, but I think, and I know this from my European colleagues in China, that even people who live there for 20, 30 years, they say they have sometimes problem to understand.
Why did you decide to cooperate with a Chinese partner?
First 5 years of our after our entrance to China, we were running our plant ourselves, and it was not very much successful. We have many good clients, many good distributors, but at the same time we face many challenges connected with the fact that we didn't have our own clear understanding of Chinese market and Chinese reality day by day. So discovering plenty of things on the market took us much longer time that our partner could manage. So after a couple of years of working alone in China, we decided to start together with partner.
While starting the business in China, did you encounter any unexpected difficulties, and what issues were the most problematic for you?
Okay, concerning unexpected difficulties, you can find them every day. Because most of difficulties are connected with the fact that Europeans doesn't understand easy so different culture. So it is the question what clients ask, what clients need, how they behave, how they communicate, what they communicate you if they don't pay, and what they communicate you if they pay for your invoice. What they communicate you if they claim, and what they communicate if they stop claiming. All this way that Chinese people communicate each other, or many ways how Chinese people communicate each other, are very different culturally of the ways that we communicate in Europe. Also, we have to remember that European business, founded on European culture, is based on 3 legs, which is Greek philosophy, which is Christian religion, and Roman law. These are 3 fundamentals of Europe. In China, no one of those exists. So you have on one side Confucianism, and on the other side you have Sun Tzu. So if you learn Sun Tzu, you see that some assumptions there are very different from European culture, and then you have to try, or you try to implement them into your daily life, which is usually not easy.
Did you encounter any issues typical for the Chinese market that are still problematic for you?
We have to separate two things. First, entire world change, and also Chinese government change, Chinese policy change, internal and external. Also customers, they also change their demand. Many European companies, they expect that Chinese market will demand higher and higher quality because, as you probably know, many of European companies were surprised how low quality is accepted by Chinese customers. And many of companies, they wait and wait, but quality is still quite far from European, or let's say from our European understanding of the quality. It doesn't mean that Chinese quality is low. Chinese consumers, they just need sometimes more simple features of the products. They are less demand. But what is most important, they don't like to pay for the features of the product that are not important for them. So in Europe, we tend to create most sophisticated products, high quality products, or what we perceive as a high quality, but it doesn't mean that it is high quality for Chinese consumers. The second issue is the issue about the internal policy. I think this policy change because the world is less and less open, and China is going to protect their own market more than before. At least we see such a behavior from many local authorities, and this will create another challenge to European companies. The last one is what I already said, understanding of Chinese customer or understanding of Chinese behavior. And I think this one will not change very soon.
From your current point of view, what are the biggest benefits of presence in China?
First of all, so different expectations from customers influence into way you create your products. By learning totally different or strongly different expectations from customers, and we operate in construction market as we produce construction materials, you can learn and you can create ideas for totally new products that doesn't exist or in Europe or in Americas. First benefit that we already have from China, from our existence in China, is that we created there some new products that we were able to transfer them to Europe. Second is that in China there are many different business models, especially there are clusters of 200, 300 companies in one industry who cooperate, and at the same time companies that compete. This way help them to learn from each other much faster than we learn in Europe. So we try to implement this idea into our ecosystem around Selena in Europe, but that's not easy. Europe is too small to create such a clusters like China. And the third one, at least for our company, is that in China sometimes they made the products from very different raw materials that we produce in Europe. We are active in construction chemicals mostly. So we found that for some very basic or very popular applications, they try to use different materials and they are successful. So we learned that and we are trying to implement it to Europe. Concerning marketing, I think marketing is different mostly because of culture, and there are not too many ideas to be transferred, although I could find 2 or 3 for good transfer or to US or to Europe. So overall, I can say that benefits are mostly from what you learn, not what you gain.
And my last question is about learning. What have you learned from expansion into Chinese market? And if you could go back in time and give yourself 3 pieces of advice, what would that be?
First of all, China is not country, it is the continent. It is the continent who is trying to call him country, but in fact the size of China and the population of China, also geographical size, is so huge that to manage business there, you have to use quite different tools than you use in Europe. For example, you have one distributor in Stockholm, another distributor in Athena, and the next distributor in Paris, and all of them are in one country, and all of them want to deliver within 24 or 48 hours. Therefore, logistic chain in China is much more efficient than in Europe. In Europe, still we have borders, even if we are in one European Union community, we still have borders, and the logistic chains are not that efficient. In China, logistic chains are much more efficient. The third, what we learned there, is that to manage relations with Chinese customers, sometimes you need to show very different attitude than you show in Europe. In Europe, most of us work based on the trust created by the law, by that we follow the law, and that law is enforced by the government. In China, they create trust based on relations, and the relations are much earlier important than in Europe. In Europe, you start do business and then you build the relations with your customer. In China, you start the relations and then maybe after 2 years you start business.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I wish you successful business in China, to all of you.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Krzysztof Domarecki, and I'm sure all of us had gained a lot of insight from this interview, a lot of good, useful tips for doing business in China. So, and before we end this webinar, so I have 4 important summary based on our discussion today. The first one, so the CE investor has to remember that China, to focus on China growing domestic market and the increasing Chinese purchasing power. And secondly, as mentioned by Mr. Domarecki, China is not a single market. So every province has different character and different business opportunity and different market approach. So you have to analyze the risk before actually enter into China. So the third one, as mentioned by my colleague Michał and Agata, so take tax and legal implication into account for your investments. And the last one, I think is very important, working in China, working with Chinese, investing in China, you have to be patient, persistent, and flexible. Since cost is not a big issue for you, so I think like we have to be patient and more flexible and with great understanding about cultural differences in business. So, and once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And we really appreciate that a lot. So if you have any questions after this webinar, so we welcome you to send it to us. This is our contact details. So anything related to what we discussed today or probably something out of the topic, so you're welcome to send it to us. So, and thank you very much again from my side.
6 years.
Yeah. So
Which is goodbye and
yeah,
thank you.
xie is like thank you in Chinese.
Thank you.
All right. So xie and thank you very much, and see you again next time. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.